I'm not quite sure how I feel, having been invited to cover the very early days of RISC, and it's made me reflect a lot over the last 38 years that I've been involved with the organisation. So just going right back to the very beginning, in sort of 1981-2, which is when Colin was involved and before I joined, we grew out of a WDM group that existed that recognised the importance of educating people in their own community for if there was ever to be change, and that it was within countries like ours that power rested, really. So they set to with trying to raise money to set up a project that would that was called World Education Berkshire, which is still our official registered charity name, although not many people are aware of that. So that name of World Education Berkshire now just forms an umbrella over the organisation, under which many other projects sort of operate. So the key, so there was a group of WDM activists sort of based around the Bracknell area that set the whole project up, and the person who sort of, if I call her, was their leader in many ways, was a woman called Anne Yarwood, who was the driving force of the organisation at that time, and an inspirational character in many ways. And she managed to secure funding from the EU and from something called the Manpower Service Commission, which ran community programs in the early 1980s, and community programs were in some ways a cunning scheme by the Thatcher government at the time to sort of massage the unemployment figures down. So instead of paying people, and at that time there were 4 million people unemployed, instead of paying them dole money, they paid them to get involved in community projects. And that money really spawned many radical organizations that still exist today, because it enabled people to come off the dole and receive a similar amount of money without being hassled in any way, to conduct all sorts of projects. So that the organization got funding from Oxfam and Christian Aid, from the EU, and from this Manpower Service Commission, and bought a double-decker bus, which the idea was that it would tour around schools and community groups, running workshops to raise people's awareness of global development issues. At that time, when I joined the project in 1984, and there were 25 young people who were also, not everybody was not young, that's not true. There were 25 people who were unemployed, and it was really a very diverse group of people. So I think I'd probably say that it was a microcosm of the world in Berkshire at that time. And so my involvement really came from, so as Zainab said, you know, my interest in development issues came from studying agricultural economics at university, having a couple of very radical lecturers at the time, and then seeing that what most of my fellow students that wanted to be involved in development needed to get experience to be able to get a job. And the only way at that time really to get experience was to do VSO. And I remember very clearly reading an article in the New Internationalist published in the late 70s really, which was called Killing with Kindness. And it left such a strong impression on me that there was no way that I could follow that path. And it was, you know, it committed me to a lifetime of working within my own community and not within other communities. So I was also became aware that we were as rich as we are in this country because people were as poor as they are in other parts of the world. And all this had their roots in colonialism and everything else. So this all, you know, so this amazing project that was set up in Slough, which is where we were based at the beginning in 1984, fitted perfectly with my values at the time. And I discovered what development education was. And I'd like to just read a short bit from this book, which many of you would have been given when you started at RISC. And so, which gives a description of development education, which I still think holds true for today. And I think it's then very nicely summed up today, International Women's Day, by a Honduran woman called Elvira Alvarado. So what is RISC? RISC is a development education centre working with people locally and globally to promote human rights for all and a more equitable distribution of the Earth's resources. Development education is a process which aims to enable people to understand links between their own lives and those of people throughout the world, increase awareness of the economic, social, political, and environmental forces which shape all our lives, create poverty, inequality, and oppression, develop the skills, attitudes, and values which enable people to bring about change and take control of their own lives, and to work towards a more just world where power and resources are equally shared. And for me, a paragraph written by Elvira Alvarado many years ago, who was a Honduran woman who worked with peasant communities to help them obtain basic needs like land, food, education, and healthcare, sums up why we do what we do. And it says, we're not asking for food or clothing or money. We want you with us in the struggle. We want you to educate your people. We want you to organize your people. We want you to join our struggle. Don't be afraid, gringos. Keep your spirits high. And remember, we're right there with you. And we believe that this was why we set up a solidarity centre, which enables us and others campaigning groups to work together is an appropriate response to that challenge. So that really sort of sums up why we did what we did. So we spent 3 years working from 84 to 87 with the bus project, and probably most people worked for 1 year on the scheme, and there were probably 70 or 80 people that worked, and the bus was not a particularly effective educational tool, but it was an extremely good key to open the school gates, because for some reason you just said you wanted to bring a double-decker bus into the playground. It was completely useless as an educational tool, because what we really wanted was the school hall to be doing large simulations and all sorts of other things. And we worked towards, from that, doing workshops with many schools over the years to recognizing that that more important than that, and this came a number of years later, was the whole schooling approach, and that embedding development education within a school, or global citizenship education, or whatever it might be called, is far more important for it to have a lasting effect. And we also, as an organization, moved away from working with students, largely with students, and recognizing that it was, the multiplier effects were far greater working with the teachers, because they would remain in the school and hopefully would continue that work for many years. So, and with limited resources, we continue to work primarily with teachers. So, you know, I said that we were working it was an extremely diverse group of people, with many different skills, from musicians to poets to, I mean, and it was really a microcosm of the world in Berkshire. It was at this time that we made the transition from being a multicultural organisation into being an actively anti-racist organisation with a very strong feminist influence. And that, I think, is, you know, that really is the roots of our organisation, that it was important that you did something with the knowledge that you gained from that. It's all very well having the knowledge, which sort of led us on after sort of, well, the time's really flying, isn't it? I better speed up. So that's only 3 years. 3 years in 15 minutes, so I better really speed up. Okay, so after the community programme, the EU project, Anne Yarwood, and the many, many people that worked with us in Slough, we decided we wanted to have a more permanent base. And it was really important for us to have a visible base, so that we weren't hidden away in the back of a community centre. So there were 4 of us that moved from the project in Slough and set up what became RISC, which was at the time Reading International Support Centre. Now, there was a reason why the S was support at the time, and it was mainly for political reasons. And the S became solidarity 9 years later, when we moved to the building where we are now. So it just seamlessly, the S changed from support to solidarity, which was very important to all of us. So there were 4 of us, which was, and some of you will have met some of these people, but there was myself, Barbara, Benta, who's in one of these little boxes somewhere, and we'll be doing another one of the sessions, and another woman called Anne. And we formed a collective, and that was the end of the hierarchy that had previously existed in the project. It was very important that we were visible, and we also needed to make some money. So we managed to get a grant to pay the rent on a small building up the road at 103 London Street, same side of the road, but up towards London Road. And we set up a fair trade shop in 1987, before the term fair trade was really used. So it was at that time alternative trading. We sold books, and we began to make contact with people that were fair trading. And that became the sort of cornerstone for our income generation, and enabled us to build up a trading track record, which then became very important when it came to moving to the new building at 35 to 39 London Street. So whilst we were there, we continued to do and expanded our formal sector education work. And in 1988, we were joined by, we had a new EU project which built on the work that we had been doing before, and it was called Focus for Change. And it was a project which looked at challenging stereotypes through challenging images. And I think Dave, in one of the future talks, will talk more about that. But it's at that time when Dave Richards, Olukemi Williams, and Sally Meacham worked on an EU project which was for 4 years. We had another EU project after that, which was Fair Trade on the High Street, which Bente will probably mention later. So if anybody's interested in one of the packs that was produced by Dave, Olukemi and Sally all those years ago, I think that it's probably still current. Whilst we were there, it was very clear that sort of our politics were about solidarity and not about charity. We were always and Bente will talk more about the program of speaker events that we organized, but our aim was always to try and provide a platform for people to be able to speak for themselves. So we were there for 9 years, and then in 1996 we moved to where we are now. We'd outgrown our old premises. We'd become too successful. We had one meeting room there, and office spaces were very cramped. The shop wasn't big enough, and we were already running a Christmas shop in the middle of town, which Fiona, who still and this was the time when Fiona joined us. And I don't know whether she's in one of these little pictures somewhere. Can't see her at the moment, but and this is when Fiona joined us, and she became the first coordinator of the World Shop. So when we moved in '96 to Reading, it was because we built up a trading record, we were able to approach a bank and borrow the money to buy the building. So RISC was a big risk with a K, and with the support of hundreds of volunteers, we turned a derelict building into what it is now, and it took about 2 years work. So there were people, a huge range of different people that, thinking about this has made me think about a lot of people. And I remember, our relationship with Reading Prison was very central at the time. And even before we got there, there was an unemployed banker that helped us write the, I'm not quite sure why he was unemployed, but anyway, he was an unemployed banker, and he helped us write our business plan, which got us the money from the bank. And we needed to have personal guarantors at that time. And we, in 2 days, raised £80,000 worth of guarantees from individuals in Reading, each guaranteeing between £1,000 and £5,000, because it was a very risky project. All those guarantors were, it was agreed that they'd be released when the value of the building went above 50%, when the loan to value was less than 50%. And that was achieved within a year, and all the guarantors were released. So our relationship with the prison, I remember that particularly fondly, all the different people that we worked with from the prison. And it even So what we actually found was, in addition to all the prisoners that were coming to work there, a lot of the prison officers realized that they liked coming and working there a lot more than they liked being in the prison all day, until the governor of the prison realized that they'd lost quite a substantial number of the officers and found that they were all down at RISC doing building labouring work and not in the prison where they should have been. So, but it went on for some time. So 25 years later, we're still here, and I think we're looking forward to the next 25 years. And our, our key projects or key aims and objectives remain the same. We have a very successful fair trade shop. We have very successful education projects, and we have new projects, relatively new. Well, actually, they're not that new now, like Food for Families, which I know many of you are involved with. And I think that's probably enough, seeing as I've gone well over my time.